This is the University of California, Los Angeles, better known as UCLA. While most institutions of higher learning date back many ivy-covered years, UCLA has grown to maturity in little more than 4 decades. Young though it is, in its own right, it is now one of America's most productive universities in terms of teaching, research, and scholarship. But UCLA is also one of 9 campuses of the University of California and shares a distinguished academic tradition. Each year, UCLA helps to celebrate the university's Charter Day, the anniversary of the founding of the state university in 1868. For the 1964 ceremonies, 2 world-famous speakers were invited, President Lyndon B. Johnson of the United States and President Adolfo Lopez Mateos of Mexico. Shortly after Christmas, the White House and the university announced that the 2 presidents would meet in Los Angeles on February 21st. Ordinarily, Charter Day is handled by the Committee on Public Ceremonies, but in 1964, because of the extraordinary nature of the event, a special planning committee was created under the co-chairmanship of Andrew Hamilton, Public Affairs Officer at UCLA, and Earl C. Bolton, Statewide Vice President, University Relations. On the committee were capable and experienced people from many of UCLA's departments. The planning committee first met in early January and many times thereafter. One of the first questions was where to hold this extraordinary event that would draw thousands of students, faculty, alumni, and employees, and the general public. It was decided to build a temporary stadium on the UCLA athletic field using rented bleachers and folding chairs to seat as many as 35,000 spectators. The women's gymnasium nearby could be used as a faculty robing area before the ceremony and the student union for a reception afterwards. Once the basic decisions were made, ticketing became a problem. How to make tickets available on the fairest basis. It was decided that students and faculty should be given preferred treatment. Accordingly, 15,000 tickets were made available to students, faculty and their families 3,000, alumni 5,000, non-academic employees 5,000, high school students 2,500, general public 4,000, and for members of the official parties, the consular corps, and special guests 500. Distributing tickets kept Harriet Waldron and Patty Carew very busy. Much of the planning was done on the ground where Charter Day was to be held. Robing rooms had to be inspected, the line of faculty march determined, facilities for the press had to be provided. Early in the planning, Hamilton, Bolton, and Professor Robert Newman, director of UCLA's Institute of International and Foreign Studies, flew to Washington, D.C. to talk to members of the White House staff. Later, White House and State Department representatives, including Secret Service men, came to UCLA to go over the physical layout, as did representatives of the Mexican government. Among the many problems was that of what to do in case of rain. February is Los Angeles' wettest month. On the average, 6 days of rain can be expected. What would happen if it should rain on February 21st? A check with the White House revealed that President Johnson would not mind a slight drizzle, but that we should be prepared to move into Royce Hall in case of a moderate to heavy rain. Considerable attention was also given to parking problems and crowd control. Normally, some 10,000 automobiles transport faculty, students, and employees to the campus every day. What would happen when cars driven by alumni, friends, and the general public were added to this total? Would UCLA experience a monumental traffic jam? A special subcommittee of the Planning Committee tackled this problem and worked in close conjunction with the Los Angeles Police Department. Soon, bleachers and folding chairs began to sprout on the athletic field. Bleachers were the tubular steel type used at the Pasadena Rose Parade and at the Riverside Racetrack. UCLA's temporary stadium required 5 sections of bleachers capable of seating a total of 22,000 persons. No single contractor had that many seats, so several companies pooled their resources. One member of the planning committee with a long memory asked this question: how safe are bleacher seats anyway? Don't you remember what happened at a Midwest university several years ago when the bleachers collapsed, killing several people and injuring many others? But the contractor had a reassuring answer. They don't build bleachers the way they used to. They're much safer today. Many other necessary facilities had to be installed: a sound system to carry the speaker's words throughout the arena, drinking fountains and restrooms, and a first aid station. As the arena neared completion, UCLA football coach Bill Barnes remarked, "After the ceremony is over, leave it here and we'll play football in it." Since UCLA would be one of the news centers of the world on February 21st, arrangements had to be made to care for the newsmen who would flock to the campus. A preliminary estimate put the figure at 350, and this proved to be about right. 75 or 80 White House press who followed President Johnson wherever he goes, 75 or 80 from Mexico, and 200 from Los Angeles newspapers, news bureaus, magazines, radio, and TV stations. 2 weeks before Charter Day, representatives of radio and TV were invited to meet with Chandler Harris, Public Information Manager, and Hale Sparks, Radio TV Administrator, to determine their special requirements. They assembled on the athletic field and discussed a need for towers for cameramen. These towers had to be within 50 feet of the speaker's lectern and constructed so they would not block the view of the audience. To provide an honor guard for the 2 presidents, meetings were held with commanding officers of Army, Navy, and Air Force ROTC units on campus. An ROTC honor guard would salute the 2 presidents, who are also commanders-in-chief of their armed forces. It would provide additional security, and it would allow those UCLA military students to participate directly in the Charter Day program. Presidents Johnson and Lopez Mateos were scheduled to meet at the Los Angeles International Airport, then fly with members of their official parties to UCLA by helicopter. 4 jet-powered helicopters would land on Trotter Field, the UCLA track, at 9:45 on the morning of February 21st. Plans were to have the honor guard flank the route between the helicopter landing area and the women's gymnasium, then from the women's gymnasium into the arena, and after the ceremony, from the arena to the Student Union, and from the Student Union back to the helicopters. University Marshal Waldo Phelps also made plans with the faculty marshals who would lead the academic procession into the arena. Then he met with the Bruin Bells, 50 of UCLA's prettiest co-eds who welcome visitors to the campus. Protocol required that the Mexican national anthem be played during the ceremony in honor of President Lopez Mateos and Mexico. The UCLA band, under the direction of Dr. Clarence Sawhill, practiced long and late. The band would also play the Star-Spangled Banner, a medley of popular Mexican and United States tunes and music for the processional and recessional. After the program for the charter ceremony had been agreed upon, steps were taken to provide a printed program for the audience. This included not only the schedule of speakers, but the citations for the 2 honorary Doctor of Laws degrees to be given to the presidents and a brief description of the meaning of Charter Day. For special guests, a colorful red, white, green, and blue cover was designed, symbolic of the flags of the United States and Mexico and carrying the university seal. John Jackson, head of the publications office, delivers the first shipment of these special covers to Patty Carew in the public ceremonies office. A comprehensive press kit was decided on, some of it translated into Spanish for the benefit of Mexican radio, TV, and press. Harris and Hamilton go over plans for the press kit. It included the program of the day, a minute-by-minute schedule of the two presidents, biographical material, copies of speeches, background information on the University of California and UCLA, the history of Charter Day, and a cue book. Newsmen found the press kit useful in covering the complicated, fast-moving story. After the Charter Day ceremony, plans were made for the two presidents to meet regents and university officials at an informal reception hosted by UCLA alumni in the grand ballroom of the Student Union. It was decided not to have a receiving line, but to adopt the English garden party idea. Groups of guests would be stationed in various parts of the grand ballroom, while the two presidents and their university escorts would move around the room and make introductions. Don Sawyer, manager of the Student Union, made a last-minute inspection and then put the Mexican flag into its holder. On the evening of February 20th, all was in readiness for the big event the next day. Louise Bosshard of the Office of Public Information supervised Emily Inoue and Sharon Olson as they assembled the press kits. The last job to be done before the University of California would welcome the President of the United States and the President of Mexico to its 1964 Charter Day. The students decorated Sproul Hall. To the relief of everyone, Charter Day dawned sunny and clear. Although the ceremony was not scheduled to begin until 10 a.m., some people began to arrive as early as 7 o'clock to get good seats. Gates opened at 8, and by 9:15, the arena was full. Many students brought their parents. Alumni came in couples, sometimes with their children. Busloads of selected high school honor students, many of them from predominantly Mexican-American areas, arrived on campus and trooped to their seats. The perfect weather was typical of one of Southern California's unusual winters, and not a drop of rain had fallen in February. There had been some gusty winds the day before, but February 21st was all sparkling blue sky and golden sunshine, appropriately enough, the colors of the University of California. Charter Day ceremony was preceded by the traditional academic procession as the faculty marched into a special section directly in front of the speaker's lectern. Suddenly there was a roar that grew deafening as 4 jet-propelled helicopters wheeled in the skies above the residence halls, skimmed down across the arena, and landed on Trotter Field, the UCLA track. Chairman of the Regents and Mrs. Gerald Hager, President and Mrs. Clark Kerr, and Chancellor and Mrs. Franklin Murphy were there to greet the two presidents. The door of the helicopter with the presidential seal on its nose popped open, and a Secret Service man preceded the two presidents. Other distinguished visitors disembarked. Secretary of State Dean Rusk and Manuel Teo, the Mexican Minister of Foreign Relations, Governor Edmund G. Brown, Senator Thomas Kuechel, Assistant Secretary of State Thomas Mann, Mexican Ambassador to the United States Antonio Carrillo Flores, and Dr. Glenn Seaborg of the Atomic Energy Commission, and 2 Mexican university rectors, Jose Antonio Padilla Segura and Dr. Ignacio Chavez. There were also the ladies, Mrs. Johnson, Mrs. Lopez Mateos, and her daughter, Miss Avesita Lopez Mateos, and Mrs. Edmund G. Brown. After the welcome, the official party and the hosts entered 5 big black limousines to drive the short distance to the women's gymnasium. With the Mexican and United States flags fluttering in the bright sunshine, the motorcade proceeded through the ROTC Guard of Honor. Cadets and midshipmen snapped to a smart salute as their commander-in-chief went by, and President Johnson's limousine rolled up to the front steps of the women's gymnasium. The official party went inside, the men to don academic regalia, the ladies to catch their breath. But soon the ladies emerged and were escorted to their seats by the Bruin Belles. Their pastel-colored dresses added a spring-like touch to the scene. Soon afterward, the official party, dressed in academic robes, departed from the women's gymnasium. First came university officials and deans, many of them in the colorful robes of distinguished foreign institutions. Then came President Lopez Mateos, Chancellor Murphy, President Johnson, and President Kerr. President Lopez Mateos had once been professor and director of the Scientific and Literary Institute at Toluca, and one of the founders of the School of Economics at the National Autonomous University of Mexico. President Johnson, a graduate of Southwest Texas State College, had served as a high school teacher in his younger days. As vice president in the spring of 1963, Johnson had visited UCLA to address the Foreign Press Awards banquet. When this group walked from the women's gymnasium to the Charter Day Arena, the 1964 Charter Day ceremony would begin. TV and newsreel men, reporters and photographers were awaiting the official party, and the huge arena was filled to capacity with 35,000 people. At the last moment, two Secret Service men raced up to the lectern and hung upon it the official seals of the United States of America and the Republic of Mexico. Then two groups of the official party, one led by President Johnson and President Kerr, the other by President Lopez Mateos and Chancellor Murphy, entered the arena to thundering applause. Chancellor Murphy opened Charter Day 1964 and presided over the ceremony. He extended a warm welcome to the distinguished visitors and expressed the university's pleasure in having them as guests. The Right Reverend Ivo Ira Curtis of the University Religious Conference delivered the invocation. Seated directly in front of the speakers were the UCLA faculty in the traditional caps and gowns that indicate academic distinction. By custom, faculty members wear such robes on two occasions each year: Charter Day and Commencement. At the 1964 Charter Day ceremony, 500 UCLA scholars took part. President Kerr said, "The presence of these two world leaders is particularly fitting. Both have been teachers and bring a teacher's appreciation to our observances. They symbolize the bonds of international friendship that are traditionally close in the world of learning. Their participation here underlines the central role that all great universities are coming to play in modern society." In addition to audience seating, a speaker's platform had to be built to accommodate more than 100 members of the official party. President Johnson responded to the audience applause and then reviewed the international scene. He warned communists that they are playing a deeply dangerous game in South Vietnam. But in this battle for freedom, he termed the fight first and foremost a contest to be won by the government and people of that country for themselves. President Johnson went on to say that Mexico and the United States walk a common road in the winning of our independence, in the strengthening of our institutions, in the relentless quest for social justice and human rights, in the pursuit of a better way of life for our people. He continued with these words: "The power of the free community has never been greater. On the tactics of the day, we sometimes differ with the best of our friends, but in our commitment to freedom, we are united. In North America, we speak in English, Spanish, and French, and all are tongues of liberty." This is the Charter Day Arena looking east from the roof of Sproul Hall. To the rear and serving as a backdrop to the magnificent scene are several Romanesque buildings, including the men's and women's gymnasiums, Royce Hall, and the library. In the foreground is a temporary parking area for the overflow of automobiles on this particular day. The arena is a great square with the speaker's platform at the far end. Following President Johnson, President Lopez Mateos spoke in Spanish, and his words were translated into English. "It is the mission of universities to strengthen the links between scientific theory, technology, and the vital needs of man," he said. "To this end, we have a right to demand from students and professors to be jealous guardians of the humane utilization of science, active agents of international accord, and vigilant consciences of the preservation of universal peace. Chancellor Murphy hooded President Lopez Mateos as President Kerr read the citation for his honorary Doctor of Laws degree. It characterized him as constitutional president of our sister republic, the United Mexican States, a nation now launched upon the second half of its second century as a sovereign power. He has labored unceasingly in the cause of peace within his own country, with his neighbors, and through his leadership in world affairs. Regent Edwin W. Pauley hooded President Johnson as he also was awarded an honorary Doctor of Laws degree. Reading the citation, President Kerr said, "Son of Texas, schooled in frontier traditions of independence, self-reliance, and public service, with firmness, practical skill, and a sure instinct for the democratic process, he finds and fosters the consensus upon which a free society depends." The audience was asked to wait in place until the official party had departed. But some enthusiastic spectators rushed up to ask for autographs or take pictures. The two presidents and their ladies did not seem to mind. Because the two presidents were on a tight schedule that day, only a brief informal reception was planned after the Charter Day ceremony so that they could meet with Regents University officials and their wives. Chancellor Murphy escorted President Lopez Mateos. Among others, they met Mr. and Mrs. Norman Chandler. He is chairman of the board of the Los Angeles Times, and she is a regent of the University of California. President Kerr escorted President Johnson. Photographers dogged the footsteps of the honored guests as they moved about the room. President Johnson met two of UCLA's vice chancellors, Dr. William G. Young and Dr. Charles E. Young. And Dr. John Galbraith, chairman of the Los Angeles Division of the Academic Senate. And the Norman Chandlers. Mrs. Kerr escorted Mrs. Johnson, while Mrs. Murphy escorted Mrs. Lopez Mateos. The visit of the two presidents was almost over now. As they emerged from the west door of the Student Union, they were flanked again by an ROTC honor guard. But they found it hard to resist friendly well-wishers. In spite of aides who looked anxiously at their watches, President Johnson took time out to shake some hands. The four presidential helicopters had warmed up and their rotor blades were turning as the two presidents and their entourage said their farewells. Charter Day at UCLA was over. It had been one of the most successful and most spectacular in the State University's 96 years. it would be long remembered as the day the two presidents visited UCLA.